Let's just send some positive thoughts to editing me, who's going to have to put a lot of covers into this video. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelf because I'm in the business of misery. Let's take it from the top. Today I'm talking about Sebastian de Castell's Spellslinger series. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I've got these two in the background being representative of the series as a whole for me because I own these in all sorts of different formats. Some of them I bought myself, some of them were review copies. I know for a fact this one was. I can't remember 100% where all of them are from. Suffice to say, regardless of their origins, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm also going to keep this video free of major plot spoilers for the series, but fair warning, I am going to talk about the trajectory of the series as a whole, so if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, do click away now. A quick content warning as well, these books do contain themes of violence, abuse, sexual assault. It's not often on page, it is occasionally, but most of the time it's reported. But because overall these books are very light-hearted, I didn't want to not mention it because I feel like that would be quite the extreme confusion. So yes, fair warning, if you're going to read these, those things do crop up. This is a YA fantasy series that, quite obviously, draws its inspiration from westerns, gunslinging kind of stories, but in a fantasy setting. The first book, Spellslinger, released in 2017, and the last book of the full series, Crownbreaker, came out in 2019. Yes, you heard that right. 6 books in 3 years. I'm convinced they had him chained to a desk writing for them. And on top of that, the prequel, Way of the Argosy, came out in March of 2021, I think. If memory serves, I kind of joined the series at book 2, which is called Shadow Black. I fell off the wagon a little bit at around about book 4, and I recently reread the whole series, as I say, so it's fairly fresh in my mind, but I wasn't quite reading every single book as they came out. Sebastian de Castell's website describes him as a swashbuckling fantasy author, which seems about right. He is Canadian, but he holds a British passport. I don't know why that's relevant, but it was on his website, and he has been publishing books since the Traitor's Blade series, which started in 2014. So Spellslinger, as I say, it's a kind of fantasy setting with Western elements, and our young protagonist, Kellen, is a member of the Yantep tribe, and his big dream is to become a powerful mage in order to make his terrible father proud and also to rub it in his uber-talented sister's face. The main problem with this is that Kellen is not good at magic. One day, who should come wandering into town but the Argosy, which is a kind of type of... they're not quite magicians. It's hard to explain. She's in Argosy, she's called Various Parfax, and she's amazing. She witnesses the start of a chain of events that lead to Kellen running away from home, or being cast out depending on which way you look at it. And Kellen ends up tagging along with Farius. He also gains a business partner who is a vicious squirrel cat who is mainly focused on eating butter biscuits and other people's eyeballs. Look, a lot happens to set up this story, okay? So the books follow Kellen on this broadly very large adventure. They're kind of self-contained stories, but broadly speaking, a very large adventure where he learns the ways of the Argosy and also manages to get himself far more tied up in a lot of political troubles than any one person probably should. Can a kid with one spell and an angry ball of rage as a business partner really make a difference in the world? Well, probably not, but hey, someone has to try. One of the things I really like about this series is the world building. I really like the way that Sebastian de Castell creates different cultures in his fantasy world. It's a very big world that we get to explore over these 6 books, and we see a lot of different cultural elements, a lot of different religions, a lot of different magics, a lot of different various things, clothing, beliefs, all of that stuff, and I really liked getting to see a lot of that difference, partly I think because Kellen is set up in the first book as somebody with quite an isolated worldview, and seeing both the bad and good of those things through Kellen's eyes is really interesting. There's a lot of detail, there's 6 books, there is enough space for these things to really be learned and to meet characters and, you know, gain information about these things, and I just think it works really well. One of the places I really like is the Seven Sands, which is kind of a small, fairly neutral, not really thought much of area of the desert, but it's called the Seven Sands because there are different colours of sand, and like you'll be in the blue section, and I just think that's a really cool idea. It was something that really sparked with me, and it's that kind of thing of these different settings all really resonated with my, I guess, whatever vision centres are in my brain. I could see things. The magic system, or should I say magic systems, they are very varied, and we get to see a fair number of them across the series. Kellen's one spell that I've mentioned is Yantep magic, which involves somatic shapes that you do with your hands, and you say a word, and it's all to do with sparking bands on your wrists. I'm not going to get too far into it, but suffice to say that Kellen's one spell essentially involves him doing finger guns. It's amazing. But we do encounter various other different kinds of magic. There are coin magic, there's card-based magic, kind of. And there's a lot of things that feel like magic but aren't, and I very much enjoyed that. I thought it was very interesting. Again, I think that comes into the varied nature of these books, is that we get to see a lot of different interpretations of things. I think that's another real strong suit of this book. If you get a little bit bored with one kind of magic, there's probably another one that you can fixate on for a bit. It suits my short attention span. A non-sucky male protagonist. Now, I'm not going to say that I loved Kellen 100% of the time, that he was absolutely fantastic and never problematic, because that would not be true. Kellen has his moments, but overall I really liked Kellen's journey, and I think one of the things that makes Kellen a good character is he has the ability to admit that he's wrong on occasion, and also listen to women in his life. How fascinating, how wonderful. I just genuinely appreciated it. When I first started this series, I thought he was going to really annoy me, because at the time pretty much all male protagonists really annoyed me, but Kellen won me over, and I was pleased by that. He's a good character to have as your main character, and there are other amazing side characters as well. Just top notch. It would be remiss to not mention the humour of this series. There's a lot of banter, there's a lot of funny moments, there's a lot of irony. It's just a fun time. I really think that that's one of the biggest selling points of these books. They do deal with very, very difficult ideas and difficult things, but they are very funny at the same time. I think what I really appreciate about this series is it does have that banter, it does have that back and forth, but it never feels cringy or forced, which I think some YA banter can do. And I think partly some of that's because there isn't necessarily a romantic relationship between some of these characters, so it never feels like it's trying to build the tension. It's just people being funny, and it really works. I enjoy it greatly. And the last thing that I want to talk about that I enjoy in this series is that these books aren't afraid to tear things down. So I've mentioned there's all these different kinds of sorts of magic and power and so such, and in some ways the earlier books are kind of Kellen collecting these things, and one thing that I really appreciated is that the books aren't afraid to take things away from him. He doesn't just become endlessly powerful. There's a lot of times where you'll really feel like you know where a book is going, and then suddenly everything's cut off again, and Kellen's just back at square one and just has to use his wits, those that he has. I just think it's really clever, and I think it's an important thing to do, especially in a 6-book series. Like, your character cannot just keep winning, you have to take things away from them, and I think book 4, which is this bad boy, really spelled that out for me, and I think I definitely appreciated when that happened. It was one of the times I felt most connected to Kellen as a character, was when he had everything taken away from him and he had to kind of fend for himself. On the flip side of that is that there are times where Kellen feels a little bit too overpowered, and I think that's one of my nitpicky cons for this series, is that on occasion Kellen has so many different things he can do that when he then doesn't do one of them, it feels like a plot hole. And it isn't necessarily one, because there are reasons, but sometimes you're just there like, well, why don't you use this? You haven't even mentioned this power that you have for the whole of this book. What's going on? And I think that's, slightly the nature of how this character's been set up. It's not the worst thing in the world, but if you are a person who gets very fixated on plot holes, that might be a problem. The other thing I will mention is that if you do read this series and you want to read the prequel, I don't think the prequel is as strong. I'm waiting for the second of the prequels to be out to really pass judgment on that, but I didn't hit the same for me, so my recommendation is to read the original 6 books and then maybe read the prequel if you're in the mood. I don't have very many YA comparisons because I don't read a lot of similar YA, because I tend to run in the opposite direction from YA with a male protagonist, but there's something Joe Abercrombie about these books, and I think it's just that slight sense of humour in very bleak situations that comes through in that, and also a hefty dose of irony. So that would maybe be something I would compare. I also think A Chorus of Dragons, that series, also has a lot of humour and a lot of self-awareness, which I appreciate. The other book that I've recently read that has a very Western setting is, I'm gonna grab it because it's just behind me, American Hippo by Sarah Gailey. It's a Western, but it's got hippos. Who doesn't love that? Should you read this? I would say yes. If it's something you think you're going to enjoy, I think it is an enjoyable time. I know a lot of people who really loved this series, who really loved these characters. I absolutely did as well. As I say, the prequel is a little bit meh, but the first 6 books are very, very solid. Have you read these? Have you read any of them? Did you continue on with the series? Have you read the prequel? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear them. While you're down there, also, you can follow me on my social media. You can subscribe if you haven't already. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now.